What a beautiful day here in Okinawa. You know, one thing I really love about here in Japan is the streets are so narrow, and you'll be walking and it'll just be enough space for a car to go through, and then you'll go around a corner down a hill and you'll see some awesome houses, some awesome architecture. Check out this. Just a really old home. So cool. It just blows me away. Everywhere though, you'll just be walking and it's like the main way to go to a place. Just these little narrow streets. It's so cool. You can really see that these civilizations were developed before cars because of the narrow streets. I just stopped off at a 7-Eleven. I'll go to 7-Eleven, try the hand rolls, try the noodles, try everything. So I picked up a hand roll. It's like a mayonnaise tuna hand roll. Let's try it. Let's see if it's worth the hype. Wow, that's really good. 7-Eleven. It's cheap too. This was like $1 for this. So cheap. It's actually incredible. This is better than any sushi I've had in Canada. Holy. And it's just 7-Eleven. Highly recommend the mayonnaise tuna hand roll. It's so good. Guys, I'm very excited. Today, I'm gonna be exploring an area of Okinawa that has a lot of sad history, but a lot of very interesting history. I'm gonna be exploring the tunnels in right here in Naha that the Japanese soldiers were hiding in. I'm gonna learn more about it today, and hopefully I don't get too emotional. I'm very excited to see this. I've been wanting to see this ever since I was a kid, watching old war movies, and it's just gonna be so interesting to me. Check this out, guys. So right here behind me is one of those tunnels. They closed off this one, but I'm gonna be entering other tunnels today. I'm so excited. The Battle of Okinawa was such a brutal war. And one of the reasons why it was such a brutal war was because they needed the civilians, often elementary age children, to help build these tunnels, to build airfields. I think they built up to 15 airfields in 1 year. In 1944, they started construction. And in 1945 is when the battle started. It only had 1 year. And by the time the battle had happened, they weren't prepared. A lot of the civilians were still on the island, 400,000 in fact. And this made for an extremely bloody war. Over 200,000 people died in the war in total. American troops, civilians, and Japanese troops. And 1/4 of the civilian population perished. So we're gonna be entering the tunnel. So this tunnel is where the Navy would have been. This would have been the Navy headquarters. And during the war, they didn't actually live here at first. They ended up moving into the tunnels because it was safer. Except the problem was there was horrible ventilation and so much humidity, and it just created a horrible environment. At night, the Japanese would do their guerrilla warfare, their suicide bombs on the American troops. And during the day, they would hide in these bunkers. All this tons and tons of soldiers. So it just created this damp, horrible environment to live in. Guys, check it out. Let's go in. So this is what a tunnel would look like. I have to duck my head to get in. See? Check it out. My head hits the top. Ah! Wow. Guys, I'm gonna be entering an operational room. This is where they would have done their main planning on the guerrilla warfare and the attacks they were gonna make on the American troops. Guys, look at this. This is what an operation room would look like. Because of the importance of this room, this is where they did all their planning. They wanted to make sure it was very, very strong and sustainable for attacks. And the cool thing about this is what it would have looked like. There would have been a table here in the middle. There would have been a table right over here. There would have been Japanese soldiers planning their attacks. Absolutely mental. Wow. Let's keep exploring, guys. Let's see what's down this tunnel. It just keeps going. Wow. Back in the day, there would have been wires all over this tunnel. But this is exactly how it would have looked. So cool. I can just picture the Americans coming in, the war that they would have been having in these tight quarters. It would have been just horrific. Oh. So I've actually been looking for this. During the war, they would dig these holes. The ground was actually really soft, but when treated properly, it would become really hard, but you'd have to treat it. So digging it was very easy, and then it would become really hard. But they still needed some sort of support because it could cave in during air raids, and during battles with grenades and all sorts of things. So what they used was timber. And this timber came from the island. Actually, everything they used for this war, every material they used from the island. And this timber was the ryuku. And it's a native tree from Okinawa, and that's what they used as supports. I think one of the saddest parts for me about this war was, during the day, the soldiers would hide in these bunkers, but it left the civilian population exposed to the air raids, exposed to rape, exposed to all the elements of war, while the soldiers were down here. And I feel for the women. I feel for the children. They starved. They had no food. They were literally dying of starvation, watching their siblings get blown up and their sisters getting raped. This here would be the signal room. This is where they would do the communications to Tokyo, telling them how the war was going, when the Americans came in, the tunnels, the air raids that were happening, just all the information that they'd have to relay to Tokyo. was done in here.
I request you to acknowledge his self-composed elegy accompanied the telegram. Though my body be destroyed in the grounds of Okinawa, I...
Check it out, guys. They built this complex system, all with this pickaxe. I've traveled to a lot of places. I've traveled to war-torn countries, El Salvador, Nicaragua. I've learned about what war can do and the ferocities of war. But something about here in Japan, it just hits home a little bit harder for me. You know, and the worst thing about it is it's always the civilians that suffer the most. I recommend coming to these tunnels. They're absolutely incredible. I recommend Okinawa. I love the Japanese people. They're so kind. They're so gentle. And they're so reserved as people. I'm not used to that. I'm used to being in countries where people are yelling at you and, you know, calling you from the other side of the street. Hey, gringo, what's up, homie? You know, but here's the complete opposite. Such a beautiful people that endured so much. And yet, they're so happy. When you walk past the elderly in this country, they always have smiles on their faces. They're always the first to greet you. You know, I'd actually argue that the elderly ones that lived through the war are some of the nicest ones on this island. You know, every time I pass somebody that's 80 plus and they're walking down the street, they always tilt their head and they always say hello. You know, I'm not knocking the younger generation, but you see the younger generation on their phones, they try to avoid eye contact from, I don't know, 55 down. Especially the younger they get, the more so. But you see the elderly people here in Okinawa, and they just greet you with smiles. It's so sad what those people had to endure. And yet they're some of the happiest people I've ever met.